Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at the Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright, not a Bilgesnipe.
No, you're not. Today we're talking about Minute 63, which begins with Thor changing Erik's life and ends with Thor's thoughts on Loki's mind. Back on the show, it's Travis Bowe. Hello, Travis.
What's the volume of a Bilgesnipe?
Travis!
How many still in Skarsgårds? I'm going to say 7.5.
I'm a Bilgesnipe, but they're huge.
17.5, I meant.
Okay. 17.5 Stellan Skarsgårds is one Bilgesnipe.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying?
That's
all
what
right.
I guess,
So we're going to have to do the math. We've got to check the math on that, team.
We'll see Pete at the end of the episode. He'll be back with the...
It's been great.
He'll have figured
Back
it
to
all
the big
out.
board.
That's right. All right, we're coming in on this conversation about changing, about how Thor changed Erik's life and changed everything around here. I like the idea of him changing his life, but also you just have to acknowledge anyone who was involved with an alien that came down probably would have their life changed. I mean, Elliot from E.T., I think there are plenty of examples. Put an alien in someone's life, their life will be changed.
Mac and the other... me.
Mac and me, yep, right.
I feel like this is kind of humanizing, though, right? It's humanizing in such a way to put Thor and humanity closer to the same level. That's what it does to me. It says, you changed people's lives here. That's a conversation you would have with somebody who was dealing with severe imposter syndrome, right? You are of value. You haven't just destroyed our, local forests. You haven't just done all of this, wrecked an entire small town. You really changed lives, and I think that's what this little quiet scene before other stuff happens, is useful. It's a utility scene.
Well, what we get out of it also is the fact that of the characters that we meet that came into contact with Thor, Erik seems to have undergone quite the transformation from this is a character from his childhood stories that he grew up with to holy cow, you're real, and so is Loki, and wow, Loki's trying to destroy this town that I'm in, to holy cow, now there's these things coming from space with these stones that I can study and open up portals and all this stuff, and we're seeing that. We were just talking about how he's changing in the last minute. And that will really kind of continue the thread into Thor: The Dark World as we see just how far down this this crazy path Erik goes. And it's interesting. You changed his life can also be saying, you've really opened up some doors in his mind, and maybe those doors shouldn't have been open.
Yeah, you really screwed it up.
It's they've laid the groundwork if they ever wanted to make Selvig a villain.
Oh, true. Very true.
God,
that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
That's an interesting angle to take him as a character. And I'm sure, knowing the sorts of films that Stellan Skarsgård has been in, I'm sure he would jump at the chance to play with this character a little bit more like that. The other interesting thing that Coulson says is you changed everything around here. And there's some subtext in this that we get now that really leads to what Fury is saying later when he's talking about phase 2 and the fact that we're doing this because of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting note, although with Coulson, coming out of Coulson's mouth, it sounds much nicer than when Fury is talking to Thor later about it. But still, it's the idea of everything has changed because now we realize there are these aliens that can potentially come down and wreak havoc on the Earth.
He's saying as much as he can while wearing that Section 7 badge. Change things around here is as much as he is authorized to say what has changed.
Right. He has to be a little cautious as to what he lets slip right now. Because I don't know what level Thor is.
Level 4. It's just after level 3.
I see what you did there.
Oh, but that's a terrible one. That's something like a first grader. That's a first grader level.
Yeah.
Although I'm still laughing. So there you
I
go.
know.
All right. The other thing that Thor says, they were better as they were. I mean, this is an interesting thing to come out of his life. It does sound like something a, quote, God would say when his people start becoming more enlightened. But it's also an interesting line in the scope of where we'll see Thor's stories going later with like Thor, Love and Thunder, as far as kind of the Gore the God Butcher and this idea of these, how people see their gods and enlightenment and moving beyond that and all that. I think there's an interesting viewpoint that Thor is having here about perhaps, sometimes this sort of advanced change might, you really do kind of need to be ready for it to, before it kind of blows your mind,
Yeah.
And this is a Thor that is still freshly humbled, with the whole events of Thor. He's still coming off like the consequences that led to, people in New Mexico being put in harm's way and everything that transpired there is still fresh in his mind. And I like that that's still present in his mind. And he's saying that we caused all this trouble because we run around playing war, basically.
Yeah, it's a viewpoint coming from Thor that really seems like he did learn something.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has acknowledged these things in front of him that he had never seen before, right? About how like you wouldn't have had Thor saying this about the Asgardians before he took the Warriors 3 and Loki down to Jotunheim to attack the Frost Giants, right? Like, that's not something he would have said. He felt he had reason for that. Now he is looking at this as like, we're not that advanced. And if they are learning lessons from us, that's not a good thing. And it's an interesting thing to kind of show that maybe Thor is still kind of on this journey of learning.
Yeah. Well, lest we forget, it was just minutes ago that Thor decided to come down to Midgard riding a bolt of lightning and fight first, ask questions later, right?
Well, yeah, true.
He's not learning that fast.
Well, but that's like, he's really upset at his brother.
Yeah.
Like,
and he figures
brothers, am I right?
Yeah. I can zip in, I can grab Loki, I'll be gone before
Right. I'll be back in time for supper.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Bilgesnipes. This is a fun line that Thor throws out. We come here battling like Bilgesnipe, and Coulson's reaction is perfect. Like, what? And Thor, Bilgesnipe, huge, scaly, big antlers. You don't have those? And Coulson, no. The way that
I don't think
Clark
so.
Gregg, I don't think so.
The best part about that is that he's not shutting Thor down. He's not saying,
right,
no, those don't exist here. He's open to it. He's now seen some crazy stuff. He's not saying no. I really like that choice to say, I don't think so. Maybe, but I don't think so. I love that.
Yeah. Now, Bilgesnipe, there's a variety of different ways that it gets spelled across the different iterations of the scripts that I've found. I don't know if they were, I'm not exactly sure why, but believe it or not, the Bilgesnipe do make it into the Marvel Wiki, and that is because they're featured on, I guess it's the Marvel Animated Universe, the show from the 2010s. Thor has a pet Bilgesnipe, which he named Bilgy, and he kept it in his room at the Avengers Tower. So they've put it in there, although they do credit this film as being the first appearance in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, credited to Zach Penn and Tig Notaro. So, but it does say on the wiki it's an indigenous animal on Asgard. And in fact, we do see a carcass of one of these. Presumably, it hasn't been completely confirmed, but the internet seems to have confirmed it in Thor Ragnarok when Valkyrie falls off her walkway on her ship, and she lands in some junk, and next to it there's a carcass, and people think that that is, in fact, a Bilgesnipe. So
fascinating. The, AI art doesn't know what a Bilgesnipe is. It thinks it's a cruise ship on the back of a whale, a house in Norway, I think, with a cauliflower sticking out of the top, or a series of birds.
Series of birds.
And one bird actually has a telescope coming out of one eye. So that's a thing.
that's an interesting interpretation.
Yeah.
Good luck getting to sleep tonight, everybody.
Yep. Yep. Link in the show notes.
Like what Thor says here about, because he's likening, them to Bilgesnipe. And what I like that he follows that with, they're repulsive and they trample everything. And that's him saying, we as Guardians in our warmongering sometimes can be repulsive, and we trample everything. We affect everything around us. That's probably a little deeper than I think Thor may be going, but I like that he compares Asgardians to these monsters.
I don't think that's too far. I think that's kind of where it takes me. That this is a manifestation of Thor's like newfound thoughtfulness, and I like it. Like I like that they put that in this character, especially a character that looks as young as Hemsworth does in this movie. Like he does look like a young man, ill-equipped to have learned some of these lessons necessarily, knowing full well he's a god and is, older than his appearance. But it is, I think it's interesting, and it's good and bespoke of the character. I think it's appropriate.
Well, and it speaks to, I guess, just the nature of, finding the metaphors with whatever Like, I mean, we'll often, say, use animals as references to describe people. And so for him, it's the exact same thing. And I like the way that he latches onto that in a way that, and then describes it in such a way that actually fits very much like how he is seeing the Asgardians in the warmongering state and what they actually do around them. And I like that he has hit that place where he is thinking that way.
Yeah, I agree.
Interestingly, and I've never noticed this until toward the end of this minute, Fury suddenly pipes up and you're like, oh, where did he come from?
Yeah.
At the point where they're talking about the Bilgesnipe, you can actually see Fury on the upper walkway behind them, kind of monitoring computers with some of the SHIELD agents up there. And Sitwell's behind them on the floor below, but up at the top, you can see Fury. And as Coulson and Thor walk up toward the front windows to talk, you can actually see Fury turn and kind of follow them. And I had never noticed that. It was just nice. It was a subtle way to kind of include him and have him just kind of be there. I liked the way that he's just there, because before I'm like, where did he come from? He always seems to do this. Just at the last minute, he's got a line.
He just vanishes and then he's there.
Yeah.
I thought he had business. World Security Council stuff.
Right, exactly. But it speaks to, I guess, this now that he's kind of coming into this whole thing, it's about this idea of war, and Thor is like bringing up war, how when he was young, he would court war, which speaks again very much to Jotunheim and what we saw in the beginning of Thor. But this is Fury really kind of stepping in here and trying to say, you know what, help me figure out how we can avert this. I like that we have this, the start of this conversation here. We'll get more of it in the next minute, but I think that Fury is, what I like about the way that this feels is Fury is trying to figure out how to use these different people. Like, this is his first time really working with Thor. With Thor. He had seen him images and everything, but he never had the luxury, quote, luxury of working with him that Coulson did. And so this is really his first time, and he's not sure how to read this character. And I think that it's interesting as he's trying to find a way in.
Yeah, it's like he's like a coach trying to get the most out of his team, I think. Yeah.
How bought in do you think Fury is to Thor being on the team, though? Like all of this phase 2 is dedicated to his belief or his sort of the shared belief in the military industrial complex that it's Thor and his ilk from off planet that are pushing toward the development of all of these alternative weapons, et cetera, et cetera. And we know Fury says, I believe we can do this. I believe that my plan is the best one. But is his plan really include getting over his own xenophobia right now? Like the last time he had a contact, we haven't had the benefit yet of seeing the last time he had contact with an extraterrestrial, which was in the 80s, which hasn't happened yet for us.
Or the 90s.
And so, or the 90s, right. So I'm wondering, like, how much are we supposed to believe that Fury is totally bought in on this idea of Thor being an Avenger? Like, he didn't even, I have to believe Fury didn't even know that Thor was going to show up.
Sure.
Right? Thor was off world. He was gone.
And they had no way to contact him.
Right.
I think Fury knows that Coulson believes in him. And I think he knows everything Selvig would have said about Thor. So I think that probably carries enough weight. Without that, I think Fury would probably just lump Thor in with Loki. And he's another one of these Asgardians that we just have to be prepared to wipe off the board with these weapons that we're going to create. But with Coulson there, with his history now with Thor, I think that carries enough weight that Fury's willing to believe that he's a good, true-hearted person who's going to fight for us.
Yeah.
That's where I land with it, especially because when Coulson showed up in Stark Tower to kind of invite Tony to be a part of all of this again, he gives him that information that has a lot of files on these three potential people for the Avengers Initiative. It's Steve Rogers, it's Bruce Banner, and it's Thor. I have to think that even if they didn't have a way to contact Thor, even if they didn't have a way to make sure that he was a part of the team, I would think that they had him on their radar saying, if he shows up, we definitely would love to have this guy because he seemed like he was a good person. According to Phil, he was working to help us, not hurt us. And so if he comes back, we want to make sure we talk to him to get him on board. And so I think it just is luck and timing that he ended up coming down at this particular point so that they could recruit him to be a part of this whole operation. But I have to think that Fury wanted to have him here, especially now that he knows Loki is here and from the same place. I'd like to think that he, again, based on Coulson's interactions with Thor from that movie, that this is a person who would help us fight against this person.
Well, he also knows on one side, he's got Banner, who at a drop of a hat could turn into the Hulk. He's also got Thor. Two people that, if they decide to do something, there's not a lot Fury can do to change their mind. With Thor, he can at least have a conversation with him. And maybe, just if they can, at the start here, if they can get in on his good side and make sure they're all fighting for the same thing, then we're all going to be focusing on the same target. With Hulk, as long as you can kind of steer him or point him towards the enemy, that's, best case scenario. And obviously then towards the end of the movie, we're going to need something to get all these people after the same thing, have the same motivation. And obviously Coulson will play a big part in that. But yeah, I think Fury knows that he's got these two elements that he can't really control, but he can subtly manipulate and point in the right direction.
Yeah, I buy that. I think that's and especially given the complexities of all of the relationships on board and the preparation that Fury's gone through to make sure that there is a cage that will hold, yes, Hulk, but also, hey, it's pretty handy. We know what Asgardians are capable of.
Yeah.
Even though I do also think that I'm sure if Loki wanted to get out of there, he could. They may not know that, but
right.
I mean, we've seen him be pretty slippery before.
Yeah, they probably don't know. I don't know who would have told S.H.I.E.L.D., Coulson, the extent of Loki's abilities with magic. They haven't witnessed that. They may not know that he was raised by witches and, that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, as far as they know, he never came to Earth. He only sent the Destroyer. So So yeah, good point. That it's just all guesses. It's all speculation. Thor has a line when he's talking to Coulson, and I just thought it was an interesting one because he says, "When I first came to Earth, Loki's rage followed me here, and your people paid the price." And as I was thinking about that, I'm like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Does that mean he never came to Midgard before the Thor movie? Because I'm pretty sure that it was kind of, a place that they used to come to quite a bit. But, or I don't know. I mean, they never...
just girding for a prequel where Thor destroyed Midgard even more.
Right, exactly.
Again, I think it's one of those lines that he means in the recent past.
When I first came to Earth recently.
Yeah. As far as you know, and as far as what affects the what's happening now.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to kind of back up and talk about how this walk and talk being the reason I wanted these minutes, and how
let's talk about that.
It's because of this conversation, like I said, this walk and talk, and I love the flow of it because it starts out, they're talking about Selvig and Thor is, regrets that he's gotten more or less abducted by Loki. And then that leads Coulson to talk about how, he speaks highly of you. You changed his life. You changed everything around here. And when Thor hears that, there's just a hint of a smile. Like he likes hearing that he changed Midgard. He changed Earth. He changed everything. But again, he's humble enough to then he plays it off like, it was better before I got here. Forget how exactly he says it. They were better off before. So I like that humbling aspect of it. And then continuing with the Bilgesnipe thing, and that there's just enough little comedy with that. Just the physical comedy of Thor literally like miming this creature, like that to me is really funny. Then the response from Coulson. And then as he walks away from that little conversation and it gets remorseful, it gets more serious. He reflects, he looks out the window, and I just love, this is just like a perfect minute. It's mostly all Thor. It occurred to me that a lot of what's being said here doesn't move the story along. It could easily have been cut out, but they kept it in here. And I really appreciate that about it. And honestly, to me, it's ruined by Fury piping in and saying, war hasn't started yet. Well, Fury, you started the movie out by saying war has just begun, or
we're at war. Yeah.
As of this moment, we're at war. So which is it, Fury? Are we at war, or has war not started yet? So that, to me, that line is like, that you're just trying to, because he said war, you're just trying to use the word war as a way to, announce your presence. That bugs me, but.
Well, and to your point, it is the line that Fury uses, or that Tig Notaro uses, to bring us back into plot.
Yeah.
Right. Where we, hence, or where we have character, now we have plot. Don't get too sidelined by actual emotional relationships with these characters.
Yeah.
Right, because this is the point where, as we were talking about, where Fury realizes, hey, this is my window of opportunity to rope this guy in and join our team.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of grasping whatever he can, and it happens to be this idea of war, which he uses to kind of bring up Loki and the Tesseract and all that. And that's his doorway into this conversation that he's going to have with Loki, or with Thor, today and tomorrow.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's why I wanted to be here for this week. And I love that it's kind of capped off with in my youth, I courted war. And it's a perfect way to sum up how he saw himself prior to that coronation, or, right around that coronation that got ruined, that kicked off this whole thing between him and Loki trying to spoil his big day, and him just wanting to be crowned the next king, and then that just led them all the way to here. I just love that it's all kind of wrapped up here in this little tiny walk and talk. So.
No, it is nice. It's funny. I did have a note about that line in my youth. I courted war, and I'm like, was your youth until the last film, like the end of the last film? That's when your youth officially ended.
Right, it just ended.
That's when he became a man.
That's when I became a man.
It's actually right up until the point that I rode a lightning bolt down and landed on a plane to try and get my brother. I was ready to war then too, but now I'm a man.
Well, he also could have said, I became a man. You were there when I became that man. It could have gotten all sorts of awkward.
You remember.
You remember.
You were watching from the roof of the gas station.
You watched me become a man that day.
Yep.
Oh, Coulson needs to be involved in as many awkward conversations as possible.
For sure.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Travis. This is a great conversation. It works really well for the movie and for these characters. And it's just a great beat of character development that we're kind of getting here with some comedy thrown in. And Bilgesnipes.
It's also one of those, it's a long minute. And you guys have done this long enough. You know what I mean. When I say it's a long minute, obviously it's the same 60 seconds that it's going to be tomorrow. But some minutes feel like nothing happens or they move really fast. But this one, as I started watching minute 63, I thought, oh man, I just know that it's going to cut right in the middle of Thor's, one of his great little sentences. But then it keeps going and it keeps going. I thought, oh, as he walks away from Coulson, that's where it's going to cut, and then keeps going, and it has like this moment to breathe, and it goes all the way until Fury shows up. So it's just one of those weird minutes that feels long, and I really am glad that all of this was contained in this 1 minute. So,
yeah. Yeah, for sure. They capture a lot here. It's a great little conversational beat. And they use the location well for this conversation also.
Speaking of the location, there was something weird. Once it changes, kind of does a little bit of a Dutch angle on Thor as they get Thor and Fury in the same shot. Something was off to me. I thought, why does Thor look so weird here? And it finally dawned on me. They've had to cut along the outline of his hair and his forehead because that ceiling, that roof is not there. It's probably a green screen. They've had to fill in a little bit of Thor's head. And it's not perfect every second. And luckily it's not on screen that much, but if you just watch Thor's forehead as he kind of moves his head a little bit, it's just a little dodgy because they've had to paint in that bulkhead that's behind him, I think.
Right.
Just one of those things that's finally stood out to me. I was like, oh, yeah, it makes sense that they wouldn't have a ceiling there.
Yeah, the digital work. It's funny that you bring up the ceiling. I was the thing that caught my attention was the wide shot from outside the windows as we're looking at Thor and Coulson, and we can see the whole roof of this area. And there's like a cut in the ceiling of it for. I mean, it looks like for light to come through if it's sunny or something like that. But I'm like, this is the very bottom of the helicarrier. Are you telling me like there's a window like in the aircraft runway up above where I don't know, just to let the sunlight in? I'm not exactly sure.
Yes. 100%. I believe that. Why? Because helicarriers are cool.
Well, and speaking to our conversation about like the size and scale of these things, it also, like, if that is the top, then I'm like, now my scale is really thrown with this helicarrier, because I thought there were a lot more levels above this room before we would have gotten up to that runway.
There's a lot of wasted space in this room.
Very hollow.
I've been inside of a battleship, there's not a lot of like big open areas like this,
No, right, exactly. All right. Well, that's minute 63. Any last thoughts from either of you about anything going on here?
I did notice during the walk and talk, it's the first time I really like looked at Thor and how much I really dislike this costume.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I don't know if you guys have talked about his costuming much.
We have, only in the context of people liking it.
Really? I think this
Yeah.
is my least favorite look of his. It's this chest piece that has like, I guess they're maybe meant to be lightning bolts, but like this creates like a V shape. And I don't care for it here.
I will say, in this scene, more so than in other parts where we see him, it looks more like a plastic costume than other. And I don't know if it's just because it's in the dark and so it just doesn't have the shine and the luster that we get later, but it does feel a little more plasticky here. But otherwise, I mean, I do kind of like it. I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite, but I haven't had issues with it, I guess.
Right. I also, the shoulders where he has like the bits of red doesn't really make sense because it looks like the cape must grow out of that red fabric that's there, because why would there be cape fabric, tucked into his shoulder? That bugs me. But
it's yet another innovation from Asgardian fine leather goods.
That is funny. Actually, I haven't really thought about the fact that it's like they're putting the design for the cape there, but not including the cape.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when you see him later with the cape, it's coming from that exact spot, So
under the things on his chest.
Mm-hmm.
It's like those outfits that you get, where it's got the zipper, and he can unzip. There's something back there under a panel. He lifts it, unzips it, pulls the cape out, and then he's ready to go.
Yeah.
I don't see Thor doing a lot of zipping and unzipping, Andy. That's an interesting character addition.
Well, he doesn't do it. He has somebody do it for him, Pete.
Minions? Asgardian minions?
Squire. Oh, if only we had a Thor Squire throughout these films.
Daryl.
Daryl the Squire. All right. Well, let's wrap everything up for minute 63 today. Travis, thank you so much for joining us today. We certainly appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Tell everybody about what you're working on out there.
Oh, yeah. You can also hear me over on Real Comic Heroes. That's Real with 2 E's. Just search Real Comic Heroes everywhere. Over there, we talk about comic book movies, and we go in release order. So we started with Superman and the Mole Men from 1951, and as of this recording, we're still on. We've been on a hiatus, so we're our latest one was Steel. So
wow, nice,
check that out.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
all right.
40 years worth of comic book movies to hear us talk about.
Lots of content for sure. We'll have links in the show notes, everybody. You can check those out. Remember, if you're not seeing the show notes in your podcatcher, just go to our website, marvelmovieminute.com, and you can also learn more about our membership, in which you can get early access to episodes, hiatus bonus episodes, no ads in your shows, all that good stuff. So that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about minute 64. So, Pete, thanks as always.
Tomorrow, Andy, Loki's Balm.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.